welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is your host, Jessica. I am here with the author of I Could Live Here Forever. Please introduce yourself and tell us about this book.
Yeah, my name is Hanna Halperin. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm the author of I Could Live Here Forever, which is my second novel that's coming out in April. And it is the story of Leah, who is a young woman, and she moves to Madison, Wisconsin, to get her MFA in fiction writing. And there she meets Charlie, and he is a recovering addict, and they fall in love really quickly and kind of fall into this very intense relationship. And the novel follows their kind of tumultuous and all-consuming relationship.
So first of all, I have to say this book was beautifully written in so many ways. It captures, I didn't go away for my master's, but I did go away for my undergrad. It captures that feeling of being sort of lost in a new place where you want to connect very, very well. I know when Leah gets to Wisconsin, it's like she's in a cohort and she's sort of trying to feel out the people there and see sort of where she belongs in this group that she was sort of thrown into. Everyone's a writer, but everyone's writing experience and what they do is a bit different. And I have to commend that first and foremost, because it really just like calls back to that really weird feeling of, I guess, what lunch table do I sit at, but on a grander scale, first of all.
Yeah. Thank you. I kind of played with the idea of whether I wanted Leah to be like out in the world and having a job, and she meets Charlie, just in everyday life, and falls into a relationship that way, or whether I wanted her to have her in school, and she meets him kind of in the bubble of that cohort, and I did end up writing like some of the book, putting her just out in the world, and I ended up wanting to have her in school and in kind of like that insular world, especially of an MFA cohort, kind of a little bit for what the reason of what you said, to kind of show what Leah is like in a group, and I think Leah very much feels like an outsider, which I think we all can, especially like at the beginning of something like that. But Leah feels like an outsider, like both in her group and at the MFA, but also like in her own family. It kind of like mirrors what she feels like in her own family, and we see that too. And then she falls into this relationship that becomes like more and more isolated, and whether he's isolating her, or she's isolating herself, or they're both isolating one another. It becomes very stark. You can kind of disappear more when you're just out in the world, but when it's kind of up against, I almost think of like the MFA kind of like a little family, and when it's up against kind of that MFA, you see her disappearing more into that relationship with Charlie, and so I thought I kind of wanted to see that happening.
Yeah, and the book itself, it begins with like almost like a meet cute between Leah and Charlie. And even though, like if you read what the book's about, that things are going to take some turns. But it was very sweet, and it felt very natural to the way that you would meet somebody. And when people meet, what was it like in the online for the supermarket?
Yeah.
Um, when things like that happen, especially how old was Leah again? Just
25.
25. At that time in your life where society tells you you're supposed to be meeting somebody. I mean, I know it's a little bit different. I mean, I graduated college in 2001. And I don't know how different it is now to back then, but you were told still, oh, you should be meeting the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with in college. And really, like, maybe that was fine for a different generation, but not everybody does that. Not everybody is adult enough. And I feel like your early 20s, your mid 20s are sort of shifted now. So, she's at that point. She's in this cohort. She's away from somebody who she had been dating, who she has a very long history with, and she has this meet cute. And this is what is supposed to be serendipity. This is like how you're supposed to meet the person you're going to spend your life with. And in a way, Charlie is very charming, but there are just some very subtle warning signs that sort of pop up through their early relationship until she finds out, yes, he is a recovering addict. What was it about having a character so isolated and in love with a recovering addict that sort of brought you here?
Mm. Um, that's a really good question. I I think um I think when you meet someone who you are so like taken by and attracted to and like excited by in that way, it's really easy to ignore, push away, like as you said, like the red flags that are essentially showing up almost immediately the second, almost, whether it's the first date or the second date. And I think that that's you can look back and you can maybe see them, but if you're I think for a character like Leah, who is very lonely and romantic, and she meets him, and um for her it feels destined, and so she's I think at the beginning, you want to see the good in someone, and as you said, like there's so much good in Charlie, and
Yeah.
he's not, he's certainly not like a villain or a monster, so she goes into it with a really open heart.
Yeah, for sure. And, another thing about her is she has her own abandonment issues. She has some history with her mother, who had not necessarily been as present in her life as one would want their mother to be.
Yeah, that was something I wrote in the book. Like, you learn quite a bit about both Charlie's family and Leah's family, and um and I wasn't so interested in sort of writing about, like, well, like, what is the one-to-one reason of why you know they both find one another, um but I think both Charlie and Leah are looking for sort of like a sense of like home and stability, and they both provide that for one another. And one of the things that was like kind of so like interesting about writing these characters is, um like, there were times where I felt like they really do love one another, um and are in love, and not like saving one another, but I was like, there's something genuinely like sweet and makes sense. It always made sense to me why they are drawn to one another.
Well, it's very real. I mean, it is very, very real. And, especially whether or not you're somebody who comes from a background of hurt, when emotions run, you do want to save that other person. I think it's a very natural thought, especially like if you're a romantic. I mean, this is why toxic relationships happen. This is why so many people, no matter how healthy or unhealthy they are, end up with that relationship that still haunts them, like somebody who they thought was wonderful and then they ignored some red flags and look back on and they're just like, oh my God, that was crazy. But I do think, we have that, especially when we're young, we have that um desire to be someone that the person we love the most can really depend on, is even if
Mhm.
that person has, especially if that person hasn't had that so much. So I thought it was a very natural connection between the two of them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that they are that for one another, and that feels safe. And then at the same time, they both are kind of enabling one another's kind of most like dysfunctional like tendencies, and things get like really like it becomes really dangerous. And it was like clear to me that like they shouldn't be together. And I never really like had them figured out. And so while I was writing them, I was never trying to diagnose like what is this relationship, or like is this an abandonment wound, or is this like toxic or abusive, or like I wasn't trying to use those words exactly. I was just trying to stay very much like, who is Charlie, who is Leah, and like how are they each going to react in these scenes. And that like and sometimes I felt like they reacted in really like sweet ways, and sometimes it was like, oh no, this is not sweet at all. So that's kind of what kept it interesting to me as a writer.
Yeah, I also want to know, how much research did you do into people who are addicts or recovering addicts?
Yeah, I definitely did quite a bit of research like over the past few years. I've been close to people who are addicts, and then I think like through that like personal through having been close to people like that made me want to do research. And just through having like read books or watched movies or documentaries, and then like just doing a lot of research online. um, and I went to social work school just for like one semester and didn't end up staying in it. But like while I was in social work school, I ended up like doing like like quite a bit of research on like opioid addiction and harm reduction, and things like that. It's kind of like always been in my mind as something um, I was interested in. And
So another thing I kind of wanted to sort of bring up, they both bond over Judaism.
mm,
And it brings back some memories for Leah of her own bat mitzvah and, just like milestones and things like that.
so yeah, Leah's Jewish, and I'm Jewish, and so I think I just sort of um, my characters, or at least main characters, I tend to write them as Jewish. And it's not a huge part of the book or anything, but it's usually
Oh
just
no, it's just, I thought that it was it's nice because it's not, you don't generally, a lot of times, like if a character is Jewish, it is a huge part of the book.
mhm.
And that's, I guess I don't want to say that's it's nice to see characters who are like, yeah, I'm Jewish. This isn't the point of the book, but I did think it was kind of a nice connection also.
Right. And one thing, I was kind of thinking about is, so Charlie isn't Jewish. His family isn't particularly religious, but they have a Christmas tree and they're Christian. And, briefly, Leah starts dating another guy who is half Jewish, and she's kind of, she's really sort of trying to figure out like which guy should I, date. And one of the reasons she's like drawn to this other guy is, he's Jewish and there's something like familiar about him. But I also think one of the reasons she's drawn to Charlie is because he is different than her, and his family is different than her family. And I don't know if she can actually like put into words what it is about this difference that feels compelling or interesting to her, but there's something about Charlie's home, or particularly Charlie's mother's home, that feels like homey or safe to her. Not to say that like, Judaism doesn't feel safe to her, but there are these memories sort of surrounding her childhood, and specifically surrounding her bat mitzvah, and her mother, where her mother left,
Yeah.
where everything, her family life sort of crumbled. And I think, Leah is someone who like is just craving home and family, and just this sense of safety. And it's in a way, it's a little ironic that she's like searching for it in Charlie, who is someone who is like so unstable, but there's also something in Charlie that she sees as like sweet and homey, which again maybe doesn't quite make sense, but for her it's just this feeling.
But that's like why the book is so well done and why their relationship feels so real, because that is, I think, nobody is generally one way, like when you're drawn to somebody and you stay in a relationship that's toxic, there's usually other parts to it. And yes, Charlie did have a lot of, does have a lot of really sweet qualities that you would imagine would draw somebody to him.
I that means a lot that you said that, because that was something that I wanted to, when I was writing Charlie, I wanted him to, despite like the, I didn't, I wanted that part of him to come out, and for readers to see like what was it about, there was like one of the things that the blurbs that Megan Nolan said about the book that kind of meant the most to me was like, the book is sort of this question of like, why does someone stay with someone like this? And I think that's a question that I know I've been asked that before, and I've probably asked other people that, or I've thought about it about other people, or it's something we've all kind of thought about someone else's relationship. And I know that like it's something that Leah is sort of, she's constantly being put in that position of having to like defend her relationship with Charlie. And I think ultimately it was kind of why I wrote the book, was like I was kind of trying to answer that question of like, why does Leah keep going back to Charlie? Because it doesn't really make sense. But there's a reason, and essentially it's like this feeling that's kind of indescribable, and maybe it's love, but it's like something kind of more than that, or it's like a little more than that, or like more nuanced. And hopefully, and I think a lot of people could probably relate with like what that feeling is. So I kind of was trying to describe what that feeling was that kind of kept them coming back again and again.
So what do you like to read? What are some of your favorite books? I happen to love books for some reason that deal with toxic relationships. But I am curious, what types of books do you like to read?
Oh yeah, me too. I love books about relationships. Um some of the books that that I think were like especially either influential or that have like stood out to me at least when writing this book was I love the book Lucky Us by Joan Silber. That also follows this relationship. I don't really think of it as toxic, but it's like certainly complicated, and you're always kind of trying to figure out like who has the power in the relationship. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, I think, is an amazing book that I just couldn't put down. Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan. I read that while I was like revising this book, and it just sort of like opened up. It was like, it was so exciting for me to read it while I was revising it because it felt like in conversation with this book and in some interesting ways. And I think her writing is just like fearless and incredible. I recently read The Critic's Daughter by Priscilla Gilman, which is a memoir. And I just thought it was like super, really, really interesting about divorce. And I tend to like writing and reading about divorce too, and marriage. And yeah, those are a few books.
So are you working on another book as we speak, or are you taking a bit of a break?
I'm like kind of at the very beginning of working on some new things, but nothing that I feel that I can talk about.
No worries. Oh, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk about I Could Live Here Forever. It was just so good. So good.
Oh, thank you so much. I thank you for talking with me. I really love your podcast.
Thank you. That makes me happy.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Well, once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Hanna Halperin.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.